even though I am the co-host of Metaplanet Madness, talking about Metaplanet, there is a lot of what I do that pays respects to what MSTR has paved the way for. I think that's why I kind of put Metaplanet as such an innovator, right? Is they're the first in which they've tapped the Asian markets, but now they're aggressively also trying to tap the American markets. This is F1 racing in stocks. Nobody has seen anything like it. My portfolio went up 1.2 million in a day. And this is a big boys game. This is your capital, your hard-earned capital, so you better know where you're buying. Saylor very recently last week was pretty much saying, hey, we're not looking to disclose the public addresses of our Bitcoin holdings, which is almost another way of saying, trust me, bro.
Yeah.
And that's not, to me, a Bitcoiner's ethos. Now, this is where MSTR really kind of paved the way for every one of these Bitcoin treasury companies. And so they unlocked this huge kind of Wall Street hack, this financial engineering hack, through something called at-the-market offerings, or ATM for short. The reason why we're starting this is we think this is an easy 10-bagger. Simon's first reaction was, 10-bagger? Like, why so bearish? Unless you have the right conviction, right knowledge, right mentality, you really shouldn't play this. So if you are trying to be above the crowd or front run the front runners, you need to know where to find the signal. We've never experienced what is perfect money. Another great question. Let me take a step back and kind of explain what I think there are three types or three levels of Bitcoin treasury companies.
Okay, we're live. We're back. Welcome to the show. I am Khalif Harold. This is Real Hard Money, where we talk about how Bitcoin will change the world and the people within it. Lock in, get ready for some real hard money talk. And today I have a special guest, Peter Duan, a former TradFi pro turned Bitcoin advocate, host of Metaplanet Madness, champions mental flexibility and humility, and thrives on market volatility with a bold, faith-driven edge. Peter Duan. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me.
For sure, for sure. We were just talking before we would start hitting record that I saw you maybe last year. Like last year, you just came out of nowhere and you started getting a lot of followers on X. What was it that got X's attention so fast?
I think that's a good question. I think it's a combination of factors. So I, like a lot of people, started following the True North guys, and even before that, Quant Bros episode 1. Really shout out to Punter Jeff and Raekwon for leading the charge. I've been following Bitcoin for over 4 years now, 5 years really at this point, but I really didn't click until they broke it down on what makes, at that point, MSTR very special. And don't get me wrong, even though I am the co-host of Metaplanet Madness, talking about Metaplanet, there is a lot of what I do that pays respects to what MSTR has paved the way for.
Okay. Yes, I think I saw a lot of your posts and they were very intuitive, informative, insightful. And I think the rest of the community thought so as well. You seemed about your business. I always saw you in a suit, nice shoes, belt. This guy's on point. He's sharp. I used to be in a suit all the time too in Miami. Not anymore.
Yeah. I appreciate that.
Back.
I apologize if I'm not suited and booted as usual. I'm just hanging out with my mom. She's been out of town for a month. So yeah, just in San Diego kicking it.
Oh, it's all good. We're real people, real folks. It's real hard money, So let's get into it, man. From a TradFi to Bitcoin advocate, what was the pivotal moment or realization that shifted your perspective and led you to embrace Bitcoin as a core part of your financial worldview?
Bitcoin takes, for me at least, and a lot of people that I hear, at least 100, maybe even 250 hours to really kind of understand. And it's funny because even though I have been in the TradFi world for 14 years, ever since I graduated, I actually think that becomes a disadvantage for a lot of my fellow TradFiers. The reason because we've never experienced what is perfect money. Yes, some people will say we were on a gold standard before, but even then, the gold standard had its issues, and a lot of my peers and even the managers never worked in an environment where it was in a gold standard. So we are just, take things for granted in a fiat world. So long story short, it's really not one particular moment in time, but rather it is through just the continuous study and being willing to suspend your disbeliefs in order to investigate the truth for yourself.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. We get caught up in all the things we've been taught for all our lives, right? And
That's right.
to question something like that, you think it's ingrained, like death and taxes, and tax is not theft, and things like that. You just don't question it because you think it's just how the world is. But we can change. We can change these things.
Mhm.
And I think that's very interesting. I was just going to get into, Metaplanet, and it's really the stock is going bonkers. I mean, people are like looking around like, what the heck is this? Where'd it come from? It feels like it came out of nowhere, but people like you had the eyes on the ball. What brought you to Metaplanet? What intrigued you about it?
Another great question. So on Twitter, it is probably the best source of alpha for all Bitcoin related stuff. Now, obviously, just like any social media platform, there is a lot of noise. So if you are trying to be above the crowd or front run the front runners, you need to know where to find the signal. And so that's really important context because I observed that during the MSTR run up until late November of last year, that there was only two people who called the local top. One of them is Josh Mandel, the legendary Wall Street trader who called the also very famous now 84K Bitcoin on Friday. And the other guy is actually Clymer, who is my co-host. Now, if you were to watch episode 1 of Metaplanet Madness, which you can all see on the YouTube channel Bull Standard, you'll see that he actually does not have a traditional finance background. Matter of fact, I don't even think he graduated college. But what makes him very special is what makes a lot of Bitcoiners special is that it doesn't require any credentials. It just requires a curious mind and a deep analytical brain, both qualities in which my co-host Climb That Ladder has in spades. You'll see that in the first episode, he's not just talking the talk, he's walking the walk. You see his retirement account. I think it was like started out maybe 1 million and it was like maybe a 1 or 2 year track record. And he ended it up, I think at 37 million, calling the local top one day from MSTR's top. So ever since then, I've set an alarm to his account. And after the local top, he actually sat in cash up until just about a month ago when he started obsessively tweeting about Metaplanet. And again, if you're looking for alpha and you see a guy who you respect, called his shots and also traded it and posted results, then I think it's, time for you to investigate. And for me, that actually made a lot of sense. And I just jumped right in.
Okay. Yeah, we were wondering about Climb. Is he AI? People need to know.
Oh, I feel like that's something that we'll just have to figure out eventually, right? And maybe it's ChatGPT's AGI. Maybe it's a proprietary model that my hedge fund friends made. We don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're just going to have to find out because for those who don't know, Climb just shows himself as an avatar. I think someone in a hoodie or something like that. It's like a very Satoshi type of thing. As long as his alpha's good, his data's good, I'm here for it. Okay, so there's a lot of Bitcoin strategy companies out there. We have Jack Mallers, with I think it's Cantor Fitzgerald, with 21 Capital. We have Similar. We have a whole bunch of other ones popping up. Nakamoto now was big at the conference, right? A big sponsor. And you were at the conference as well. Is that correct? Yeah, We'll talk about that a little later. But with the landscape of burgeoning companies with the Bitcoin strategy popping up now, talk about the difference that Metaplanet is. How is Metaplanet different from them? How are they standing out? Is it the culture? What is it?
I think it's, let me take a step back and kind of explain what I think there are 3 types or 3 levels of Bitcoin treasury companies. So the first level, I just call that you're a Bitcoiner in the regards that you may have a company and you want to convert your company's cash into Bitcoin. Now, that's great, and you're ahead of 99.9% of your competition doing that. But what is missing is the fact that most likely you're not a publicly traded company, and therefore you're not playing what's known in this dilution equals accretion game, which is reserved for what I call level 2 Bitcoin treasury companies. Those companies are publicly traded. They have a core group of quantitative teammates that A, have Bitcoin knowledge, and B, deep capital markets knowledge. And then also a ceiling of a group of investors, oftentimes hardcore Bitcoiners, who will give them that first round of capital to push them above 1 MNAV. Now, if for those who are not familiar with 1 MNAV or just MNAV in general, MNAV stands for multiple of net asset value. For example, if you are a $1 billion market cap company and you have $500 million worth of Bitcoin, that you're trading at 2 net asset value, MNAV. Why is that important? Well, that becomes important when you sell your stock, effectively stock dilution, and you're using that money, those proceeds, to buy Bitcoin. Historically speaking, in any time in history prior to this, if you were to issue stock, Wall Street will view that as a very negative thing, simply because you are diluting shareholders, which means very likely that you're not a very healthy company. Now, this is where MSTR really kind of paved the way for every one of these Bitcoin treasury companies. They've been doing and running this strategy now for 5 years. And they observed that at periods of their time, they traded above 1 MNAV. And so they unlocked this huge kind of Wall Street hack, this financial engineering hack, through something called at-the-market offerings, or ATM for short. Oftentimes you'll hear that when MSTR stock goes down, they often blame Saylor for hitting the ATM too hard. So what does ATM mean? ATM means that unlike you and I, when we were to sell even hundreds of thousands of shares of stock, it generally would not move the share price. However, if you're a large institution and you want to sell your stock, you need to do a SEC filing. So they've done, and this was popularized in Q3 of 2014's earnings call, which was just 2 quarters ago, they pronounced a very bold 21-21 plan. 21 billion to raise through the sell of stock through the ATM program, 21 billion through selling of debt or raising debt. So long story short, they've figured out that if you're trading above 1 MNAV, let's say 2 MNAV, and you sell your stock to buy Bitcoin, you're effectively buying Bitcoin at a 50% discount. And obviously, the higher the MNAV, the more of a discount you're buying Bitcoin. So going back to, sorry, that was kind of a long context, but going back to your question of what makes Metaplanet special is A, the MNAV is very high, which means that they can accretively dilute their shares much faster than, say, a company like MSTR, who Saylor has publicly came out and stated that they're aiming for a 1.5 to 2 MNAV. So again, using the information I just told you, they've historically traded, well above 2 MNAV. Right now, there may be, I'm talking about Metaplanet, is now trading maybe around 5.5 MNAV, and traded at sometimes 12 MNAV, which makes it a very attractive high growth company.
Yes, with MicroStrategy or strategy, they're pretty close to 1. They're in the ones now, correct?
Yeah, they're not, I don't think they're at 2, but yeah, somewhere in the ones, which means anytime that they're issuing stock, it's not nearly as accretive as someone like Metaplanet, right? And that makes sense, intuitively speaking, because they have 600,000 Bitcoin, and
Right.
since Bitcoin is hard capped at 21 million, it's kind of hard to grow your Bitcoin stack.
Yes. And I think on the last episode of, is it both BTC Bull Riders or is it Metaplanet Madness? The last video, episode 3.
So my podcast is co-hosted with Climb. It's called Metaplanet Madness, but I go by BTC Bullwriter as my own Twitter handle.
Yes. In the last episode of Metaplanet Madness, Climb was talking, and I think you interjected and said that Metaplanet's only 1% of holding BTC holdings as strategy. Is that right? They only have 1% of what strategy holds?
So
It's more
they're
than
at 8,888 Bitcoin as of June 2nd,
mm,
um, 2025. But really, it's not about how much Bitcoin, but rather the rate of accumulation, right?
right.
Against that of the market cap. So just like how Berkshire Hathaway is a $1 trillion company, and it would be quite
Mm,
hard for them to double their size versus,
mm,
say, for instance, like a Palantir that was just a couple years ago trading at maybe less than $20 a share. Now it's trading at $300 a share. It's simply a growth versus value story.
yeah. It's great for investors when you're thinking about growth and a return on investment, right? You had mentioned it'll be hard for a MicroStrategy to 10x, but quite easy theoretically for Metaplanet to do so.
Correct. So when you're looking at a Bitcoin treasury company, you're trying to figure out effectively two things. A is, well, if you're a Bitcoin treasury company, that means you're trying to accumulate Bitcoin as fast as possible, right? And
Mhm.
so since Bitcoin price is the same for all Bitcoin treasury companies, that's one factor that you can remove. But another factor is the rate at which you accumulate Bitcoin. So that rate at which you accumulate Bitcoin is measured by what they call Bitcoin yield, right? BTC yield. Or another way to look at it is Bitcoin per share. So are you increasing your Bitcoin per share despite a dilution, which actually increases the share count? So said another way, is the numerator part of Bitcoin per share growing at a much higher rate relative to the rate of growth in the denominator? And so if you look at someone like Metaplanet, it is much, much faster than something like MSTR.
Yes. So do you think Bitcoin per share, that's the ultimate metric for these type of companies? Is that the end all be all? Is that like the first thing I'll check? Are they really revving up the BTC per share? Because I think Jack Mallers was very adamant on that. He's like, everything we're doing is pushing to increase the Bitcoin per share.
Just like how any financial company you measure, you should not measure one company by one metric. So another metric I would look at is Bitcoin yield, right? Bitcoin per share is simply a snapshot of what is the Bitcoin per share. But the Bitcoin yield is what is the rate of growth of the Bitcoin stack since the beginning of the year or whatever time frame you're using. And then another metric you look at, that I look at least, is MNAV, or multiple to net asset value. So again, if you're trading at, say, a 4 MNAV versus that of a 2 MNAV, that effectively means you're twice as effective at accumulating Bitcoin. So those are kind of the three major factors I looked at. And I guess the fourth major factor is market cap, right? So if you're at a smaller market cap, that means you're much more likely to grow versus that of MSTR, which is maybe at around 110 billion already.
Can you talk about, I remember you saying that Metaplanet was aligned with shareholder interests. Tell me why.
Yes.
Why do you think that?
Well, they're really a kind of a Bitcoin treasury company in the regards that they share a lot of the same ethos as Bitcoiners. One of those ethos is don't trust, verify. This is very public, hotly debated amongst MSTR shareholders versus because MSTR is effectively Saylor's company, and Saylor very recently last week was pretty much saying, hey, we're not looking to disclose the public addresses of our Bitcoin holdings, which
Right.
is almost another way of saying, trust me, bro. Of course, he said it much more elegantly.
Yeah.
And that's not, to me, a Bitcoiner's ethos. So again, when you have a bunch of Bitcoin treasury companies, you got to find out how you differentiate yourself. And if you're more aligned with the Bitcoin ethos, like I said with Metaplanet, where they provide proof of reserves and the public addresses, that is one way to win over Bitcoiners.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great answer. That's actually one of the questions I wanted to ask you about the actual proof of reserves. And, some people, there's a lot of debate. And I actually brought this up about 6 months ago on my Twitter, and it was like, it's probably my most popular, most engaged tweet that I've ever posted. And, some people were dunking on me. They're talking about, you don't know finance. This is an attack vector. This is, well, this is Bitcoin now. We're taking over. This is a new paradigm. I give I give Saylor some credence, some leeway because he's pioneering in a lot of sorts, in a lot of ways. Be the first one through the door is the first one shot, right? Usually they say, but I think he's doing pretty well.
Yeah.
So, but at the end of the day, I think it does matter who's running the company, because I believe that Saylor, even though that his response raised some flags and it wasn't in the ethos of Bitcoiners and especially maxis and purists. I have a lot of friends. They were like, I like Saylor, but then he said that and they didn't like him, and that, and he said some other things before about custody and not holding Bitcoin. That was the
Right.
first like red flag for a lot of Bitcoin maxis. But I believe he's a true Bitcoiner at heart. And if he is not doing proof of reserves, I believe he just hasn't found the elegant solution in his mind to bring it forward as a leader, because he's still leading the company, right? But if we're going to bet on a Bitcoin based company, we want those people to be very Bitcoin centric, right? And I think that that's important.
Well, I agree with all that. Of course, I think a Sailor is a Bitcoiner, right? He wouldn't have spent the last
Yeah.
5 years getting in front of every major media outlet and podcast to shout on the top of his lungs. He was a very wealthy man even before this pivot to Bitcoin. So he doesn't need to do all this, but yet, he decided to do this because he felt like this is a very necessary part where he needs to play his part in history. So, but at the end of the day, it's what you're comfortable with, right? And I can understand both sides. But personally speaking, I want to say it's a negative for me, but it is definitely a net positive for me that Metaplanet shows proof of reserves.
So yeah, some see that as a huge red flag. I don't think it is, but others online, like Crypto Tips, they think Saylor is a huge red flag. And in a recent video, she likens it to FTX and Celsius. Over leveraged, charismatic leaders. She says Bitcoin doesn't need a hero. What do you think of that? You think it's a red flag? You think what's going on?
Listen, would I take her word over Sailor's word? I wouldn't. I don't even know who she is, right? But at the end of the day, when you say over leverage, that also kind of points to me that she doesn't really understand or spend the time to understand MSTR, because it's quite under leveraged in my opinion. It's probably hovering around high teens, low 20s debt ratio. So
It's lower than
again,
that, I believe. Yeah.
well, yeah, or whatever it is, right? But also the debt is not collateralized to the Bitcoin. So again, when I hear statements like that, it's just oftentimes, smaller accounts just trying to punch up and try to get some attention. But at the end of the day, if you're going to do that, better come with better research than that kind of very generic FUD.
To compare what Saylor and Metaplanet are doing to FTX and Celsius does show that she just doesn't know what she's talking about. But she did bring up the things like the custody and the proof of reserves. You're looking at it a very thin layer. You're not looking at it in a deep way.
I mean, at the end of the day, right, the social media is a public forum.
Right.
And you can get attention however way you want. But going back to my example of trying to find the signal amongst the noise, you got to figure out who you want to spend your time listening to. Yeah, that's it.
So let's talk about Meta. Let's get back on Meta, because I think it's really popping off. You guys grew so fast. I think you guys had like 10,000 people on a live stream or something like that. It was, come on, guys. You just started like a couple weeks in and you had 10,000 people on a live stream. That shows a lot of froth, a lot of interest, a lot of excitement for this product and this stock. So, with global macro markets going insane right now, and the things like the Japanese yen trade or yen carry trade happening, can you talk to us about how that might affect the dynamics with Metaplanet?
I mean, that's a very broad and complex topic that I myself do not fully understand, also because I just don't think it really applies. So, for example, the unwinding of the yen carry trade was the fact that for a long time it was very cheap to borrow yen, Japanese yen, and a lot of people were borrowing that and then buying very high and expensive US tech stocks that have been performing well. But the inverse happened when the bond yields blew up and the valuation of those companies had a temporary correction, and that caused some market panic. Now, that paints a broader issue of what has been happening in the Japanese markets. So I'm not a historian of Japanese markets. However, if you were to look at the performance of the Japanese stock market over the last couple of decades, it's been not great, either losing value or been flat. That is because they have a very, very high debt to GDP ratio. The society that does not like inflation at all. And matter of fact, you start seeing that in the bond markets now, where the bond yields are increasing rapidly. And since bond yields and bond price are inversely related to each other, that means the fixed income market is blowing up. So Metaplanet becomes a very shining star, both currently in the equities markets, but very soon they're going to follow those footsteps of MSTR in offering preferred equity, where in a yield-starved environment like Japan, they're going to do very, very well, and all of that is going to creep back to Metaplanet, which means they're going to acquire Bitcoin even at a much faster rate.
You hit it exactly where I was leading to, the yen trade blowing up and unraveling. And I just thought this is a super interesting thing that will be happening in Japan specifically, when companies like Metaplanet can offer a fixed financial product at way higher yield. I mean, insurance companies, corporations, banks, who wouldn't want that? If I could buy it on Robinhood, I would have bought it already, but it's like, nah, I got to get outside into another application or, another broker now. Where do you buy your Metaplanet?
I personally just buy through Fidelity. That's my primary. So Schwab allows me to buy, and also Chase allows me to buy.
And another interesting thing is Metaplanet possibly tapping into other markets, another way to expand. Can you talk about that?
So currently they're trading almost 22 hours out of possible 24 during their trading days of Monday through Friday. The primary trading market is in Japan, but US is quickly increasing their volume. And that makes sense because the US is the deepest financial market in the world. Also, they are trading in the German market. Now, that being said, the German market's volume is very, very thin, which kind of makes sense as the whole entire continent is really anti-crypto, but also Bitcoin. So, it makes sense, but I think that's why I kind of put Metaplanet as such an innovator, right? Is they're the first in which they've tapped the Asian markets, but now they're aggressively also trying to tap the American markets by opening up a Miami division. And I'm sure they have ambitions to tap the European markets as well.
For sure. For sure. Let me get your thoughts on this. What do you see? How do you view the other companies like 21 Capital, Similar, and Nakamoto? How do you view them? If you had to pick one that you like more than the others, which one and why?
They're all quite different, right? So 21 Capital has a very strong collaboration across Cantor Fitzgerald, Tether, right? And Bitfinex, and one more that I'm missing.
I think it's
But
Goldman Sachs.
no, but they're very strong. Those are very strong partnerships. Now, they're trying to play more of the MSTR game by trying to be a big boy, right? Their ambitions are quite large. So I would kind of compare like large caps like that together, like MSTR and 21 Capital. But if I would obviously choose it would be MSTR since they've been doing it for 5 years, right? And then again, I'm not trying to FUD, it's just my personal perception, right? The leader of Cantor Fitzgerald, his name is Brandon Lutnick. He's the son of Howard Lutnick, who became the legend that he is. Brandon himself is 30 years old. Of course, he's a Stanford graduate and clearly very well spoken, but I don't know if that breeds much confidence. And the same thing can be said about Jack Mallers, right? Jack Mallers within the Bitcoin space has obviously a very prestigious name because he's been in the space for a decade. But at the end of the day, now that you're a very, very publicly facing CEO, to be in a t-shirt and saying yo and like going on like CNBC and hoodie, I don't know if that will really sell to Wall Street. So at the end of the day, perception is very key, and it depends on who your customer base is. So again, those two, I would go with MSTR. Now, what's much more closer is like the Semlers of the world, right? Where they're small cap and they're trading above 1 MNAV, and they're trying to elbow their way to acquire more Bitcoin. Now, that's where I think the qualitative side of having a rabid fan base like a Metaplanet really comes into play. That's simply because the first wave of investors is not Wall Street, because Wall Street is not catching up to this for at least another cycle, which means that the first group of investors is hardcore Bitcoiners who most likely are not sitting on dry capital waiting to invest, but rather selling some existing position to rotate into your company. Now, because we're capitalists, we're trying to figure out a way to compound our money faster. You effectively need to tell a very compelling story on why you're selling your existing holdings for this new Bitcoin treasury company. Now, for me, it makes more sense selling my MSTR to buy Metaplanet, right? Simply because it's the faster horse, in my opinion. And it's not my first time doing this, right? I got when I got interviewed by the Wall Street Journal, people kind of gave me some FUD about the fact that I said within my retirement accounts, I sold my Bitcoin and I sold my Tesla to rotate into my MSTR. But again, it's in my retirement account. I'm not going to touch it for 2 decades plus, right? And so why would I pay for the management fee on Bitcoin with lower growth when I can invest in something that's higher growth? So now I sold my MSTR for Metaplanet because it's the fastest horse.
What do you think about companies that are not totally Bitcoin focused? I mean, Similar has a thriving company. I don't believe they were even a zombie company before they jumped in. I think they had a good medical business. Do you think that splits focus or deters away from attractiveness?
I think time will tell, because you kind of see this with MSTR as well, right? The majority of their headcount is their software business. And also, that's another reason why I really like Metaplanet, where yes, they have the hotel business, but that's more of a marketing thing for them rather than a distraction. So I like pure plays more as a Bitcoiner. And again, at the end of the day, is who do you want to attract, right? If you're trying to attract Bitcoiners, then try to tell the Bitcoin story. But if you're trying to attract a new pool of capital, that might be a source of alpha or that may be a source of distraction. I think it's too early to tell.
Okay. Okay. Too early to tell. All right. That was pretty heavy. We got into some heavy metrics and discussions. Let's go on a lighter note. Have you been to Japan?
No, but I plan to go when my lease is up in end of August. I was about to go to Austin, Texas right after that, but I was like, well, why am I spending an extra month of rent in Austin when I want to go out to Tokyo anyway? So most likely I'm going out to Tokyo in September.
It's great. It's great.
I can't wait.
Japan is, yeah, I love Japan. It's awesome. Clean, super
Oh,
clean. Everything you see and like everything they say about Japan is that. It's like
yeah.
all the memes and sayings about them and the mannerisms of the people. I mean, it's awesome. I love Japanese culture. So
Yeah.
the Bitcoin hotel, when you get there, I know you're gonna go visit it. Make sure you send me some pics out there.
Okay.
Um, you did go to the Bitcoin conference, big Bitcoin conference, the biggest one ever, just happened recently out there in Las Vegas. You went, and give us some inside scoops, or how was it behind the scenes and boots on the ground?
I mean, this was my first oh, this is my second Bitcoin conference. My first one was Strategy World just less than a month ago. I would say, I bought the regular ticket, not knowing that pretty much like the first day, like that ticket can't even allow you to go into some places. So I was like, oh, it felt very expensive and not very useful. So I didn't end up going to a single event, like conference event. Instead, I spent all that time outside of those events, organizing meetups with Metaplanet shareholders and also having dinners, right? I was lucky to have I created what I called Builders Day dinner. So I had Simon, his COO, Matt Prusak, the CEO of American Bitcoin, Jeff Park, and a handful of other very high caliber, Bitcoin leaders. And I was lucky to spend, a dinner with them. Right. So it's really like the alpha is not really at those events where you can just sit in your hotel and live stream it anyways. The real alpha is trying to meet people in real life and develop, personal relationships.
Absolutely. I've gone to a ton of conferences, and it's really all about the people and the connections that you can meet and the business ventures that can pop off right there on a handshake or over a drink, right?
Exactly.
And over a good steak. So So you did meet Dylan,
I
LeClaire,
did.
and Simon. And how are they? What are they like in person?
So I didn't have that much time with Dylan this time because he was like, he's like a sailor, right? He's getting bombarded everywhere he goes. Same with
Uh-huh.
Simon, but I was able to have that dinner with him. I had, a nice an hour and a half with him. And that was really, really eye-opening, right? Because I've had many interactions with executives in the past, but Simon is really in that very, very top percentile of someone who's very calm, cool, and collected on the outside, but just like
Uh-huh.
an absolute killer on the inside. Like he's got that Mamba mentality that I really love. Um, I can just tell you a funny story. I met him actually in Strategy World, like I said, about a month ago. And I said, hey, I'm actually starting a podcast with my co-host. And we think the reason why we're starting this is we think this is an easy 10 bagger. Simon's first reaction was, 10 bagger? Like, why so bearish? Right? And I was like,
Nice.
okay,
Okay.
okay. Yeah, I see where you're
Yeah.
cooking with.
That's what you want
And
to hear.
yeah, and like and I've observed like that's kind of how he is, like across all like his interactions. Again, if you ever see his like presentations, he's very 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 stoic and very
Very
calm,
stoic.
very stoic. But again, when you actually hear the words and like how he thinks, you're like, this guy
Uh-huh.
is going to be the richest man in Japan in the next 10 years and
Yeah.
probably the richest man in Asia in the next 20.
Quiet killer. Right. That's
Killer.
how.
Got
That's how.
Mamba mentality.
That's how Mamba, Kobe Bryant described a young Steph Curry. He
Mm.
said he has a quietness about him. He's a baby face killer,
Yes,
right?
baby
And you're
faces.
on the West Coast, right? He's a baby face assassin. He's quiet, but there's a fire behind there that people are not aware about. And then that bore out to be the truth, right? 4 championships later. And I see you representing the West Coast over here. You're looking very, very California love,
Yep.
dressed up.
There. Love my Lakers, love my Dodgers, rep LA through and
O'Shea.
through. I went to UCLA, I
Uh,
unfortunately have to root for the Chargers, but otherwise I'm not a angry LA fan at all. I got a lot of champions to root for.
Hey, man, I go back to the times of Junior Seau,
Okay,
San Diego
okay,
Chargers. I'm an OG NFL lover,
okay.
so he had it popping out there in San Diego for a while.
Rest in
He's a
peace.
legend. Rest in
Legend.
peace to the legend. Right?
Yes.
Okay. So we talked about the conference. No, let's talk about the conference a little more because people are saying it was kind of too sponsored, too marketed. Like, it didn't have the real Bitcoin ethos, in it. It felt gimmicky and commercial. That's the word, commercial. That's the word I was looking
Yeah.
for.
But that's also the sign of the times, right? We're no longer in the cyberpunk phase, right? We're not trying to be
Uh-huh.
scrappy anymore. We're trying to go mainstream. And so what do you expect, right? I mean, it's Bitcoin's been around for 16 years. The conference been going around well over a decade. You got to expect that, right? If you were to go to Berkshire Hathaway and to the annual shareholder meeting, I'm sure it's a bunch of commercial stuff anyways. So it's just a sign of the times. And if you don't like it, don't go. And if you like it and you expect the prices to come, then go and enjoy your
Uh-huh.
time.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so back in the day, it was like really nerdy to be in these conferences at the Comic-Con. Now we have celebrities like Robert Downey Jr. and, all the Hollywood stars there and like the hottest cosplay girls there and the movie starlets there in the Comic-Con. It's not even the same thing, but that's what happens when the masses come, when it's popular, when it's cool, you know. By that time, it's too late because, all the OGs, we already got all the good comic books from back in the day. Now you have to pay a premium for all the OG stuff, right? So that's just how it's going to be. You want this OG Metaplanet stock, you're going to have to pay me that 100x premium. We're talking a hundo X, right?
Yeah.
Just
All
like
right.
Dylan said. Don't be so bearish. Yeah, that's just part of growth. I think you hit it right on the head with that. But I did have one real question for you before we got out of here. Let me know your thoughts on what the dangers overall for this budding industry, Bitcoin strategy companies, and maybe specifically for Metaplanet?
I mean, volatility cuts both ways in the regards that it is nice when it violently rockets up, but it's really bad when it cuts back down, right? And so unless you have the right conviction, right knowledge, right mentality, you really shouldn't play this. Like, this is F1 racing in stocks. Nobody has seen anything like it. I used to be in TradFi. Like, we're talking about S&P 500, 10, 11% returns. Maybe in some private equity, you're looking at 20%, 25% if it's a good fund. But we're talking now about like hundreds of percents. Like, when I got in, I was buying around 250, right? My average cost basis is like maybe 5. And this is in the last month, right? So we're talking about, and when it spiked up to $16, and again, in the last couple of weeks, my portfolio went up 1.2 million in a day, right? And
Wow.
up until that point, I've like saw like 6-figure days, and those were like great days. But then to go 1.2 million, that's insane. But again, if you don't know what you're doing, like, and you bought and FOMO'd in at the top, which I've unfortunately seen some people do, you're going to get cut, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's investing. And this is a big boys game. This is your capital, your hard-earned capital. So you better know where you're buying.
Yeah. It's a big boys game for sure. It's not all roses here, people.
I mean,
So,
listen, right? Like if you're not taking, okay, I like to use the F1 analogy, right? F1
right.
drivers are the best drivers in the world, but because they're going at 200 miles per hour across some of the tightest turns.
Mhm.
Should the average person drive an F1 car? Hell no, right? But does that mean that F1 should not exist? Hell no either,
Nope.
right? It's
Right.
simply a level of skill set and experience that allows you to buy your way into an F1 seat and stay in the game. But if you're just trying to like be cool and be like, look, I'm driving an F1 car, you're going to get wrecked, right? So I'm not trying to like say like, hey, you're and I are F1 drivers, but like we got the experience, to be here. I lost $500,000 of my mom's money last cycle. You know what I'm saying?
Wow.
Like I paid my tuition.
Yeah.
Tuition in blood, sweat, and tears and money lost. And on top of that, I have 14 years of traditional finance experience. So I may be, I may perform better or worse than you. At the end of the day, I paid my tuition and I put my money where my mouth is, but that doesn't mean that you need to do the same.
For sure. Hey, don't be like Gladiator playing with your mom's portfolio. No, I'm kidding.
I mean, listen,
I think you know
Gladiator is
what you're
actually a
doing.
much better investor than he lets on. He actually probably had higher returns over the last 5 years than I did. So don't let his persona trick you. He's much smarter than he looks.
You've met him as well out there.
Yes, and his personality is vastly different from his online persona. So like that's another
Really?
vastly different. He's very, very timid in person. Very timid.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's
Yeah,
another thing. Be careful who you take advice with online. Like again, finding the signal amongst the noise is very difficult, right? Like, look, if this is the first time you met me and I'm in a Dodger hat in a Dana White, like
Dana White, UFC.
shirt, like you're like, why should I listen to
Yeah.
this guy, right? But then another time you meet me, I'm suited and booted. I'm talking everything I'm talking. You have a different perception of me. So really,
Right.
it's like you got to do your homework to figure out what is noise versus what is good alpha.
Exactly. And that's another reason why it's a great idea to meet people in person, right? At these conferences and conventions and actually, spend time and see who these people are if you can.
I'm telling you though, the smartest, most savvy people in the world, they keep you guessing, right? So like they keep you guessing. Those people are very rare, right? And like if they're playing that level of game, like do not be in the waters with those guys. Because those guys will cut you up so many different ways, and it's like playing poker, right? Like those guys who are like can play 2 7s versus like pocket tens, and then like they do these crazy like mind games with you. Like those people exist, and the more money is in here, the more of those type of players are here. So be very careful, right?
Yeah.
You got to know who you're playing with. If you don't, they say, if you're at the poker table, you don't know who the sucker is, you're the sucker, so don't be the liquidity for whales who then just manipulate you up and down, have you buy in at the worst time, have you drop at the worst time as well.
Look at you, man, getting all loose now. This is it. We should start the interview right now because you're getting loose. I like the sauce, baby.
And yeah, that's the real, and that's the benefit of podcasts. You get to kind of
Mm-hmm.
observe people after a long time.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, it's relatively easy now, and it's
Mm-hmm.
only going to get harder. Like the alpha
Mm-hmm.
really comes like as the market gets bigger, it's harder to generate returns, and you're going to
Mm-hmm.
get more people like me, who can mix it up, right? Like, but
Yeah.
I'm like a nice guy where like I would tell you the truth. If you have a guy who will like tell you the truth 80% of the time and then lead like a flock of people to like the wrong thing and then just slaughter them, like that Fred Krueger guy, right? He was at Bitcoin
Mm.
Maxi for a long time and then rugged people with a meme coin. You know what I'm saying? Like those people you don't
Yeah.
want to deal
What
with.
was that?
You don't
What?
like, dude, he made a Bitcoin book, right?
Mm-hmm.
Co-hosted an event called Bitcoin First, then created a meme coin, right? So those guys
Yeah.
are not stupid guys. Those guys are very dangerous people. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But that's why sometimes I like, maybe subconsciously come on here not suited and booted to show you like a different angle, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
like, yo, like there's more sharks than you know. And like if you don't know that there's sharks, don't get in the water.
This is exactly what I like. See, talking to informative people, educated, intelligent money movers like yourself, but also in a real manner, in a real down to earth manner that people can understand beyond just the numbers and all of that stuff. And this is what I'm really loving from you right now. So we're going to wrap up and we're going to ask you, this is the lightning round, Pete. So what's your Metaplanet prediction for the next 5 years? 5 years out, where do you see Metaplanet?
I don't, I never like to do price predictions, mostly because you can never get them right. And even if you do,
Mm-hmm.
people are going to look at you like a saint. And if you don't, then people are going to fudge you. So I don't really care.
Mm-hmm.
I put my money where my mouth is. I think it's going to go higher in a short amount of time. But again, that's up to you at the end of the day. So sorry if you want a price prediction, but that's just not what I do.
No doubt, no doubt. There's a lot of there's always something going on X and somebody arguing about something. We like to do hot takes. What's your hottest take on any topic right off the top of your head you think like people are talking about, or maybe you discuss something on a pod, or you talk to some people on the street or on the side? Well, it's a chance to vent.
I think Wall Street is going to take at least 5 years to understand what's going on. And so if you're here and listening now and you're really kind of willing to put in the work, and it's a lot of work. I'm in this 24/7 and I can't keep up. And it's only going to get worse from here. So like if you're not doing it, again, the sharks are not quite here yet, but they're smelling the blood because the price action's hot, right? And so you better learn how to swim fast or don't get in the water.
There you have it. You heard it first from Peter Duan. Pete, tell us about Bull Rider, your YouTube and your Discord. Where can the people find you?
So my Twitter handle is BTC Bullrider. I co-host a Metaplanet only podcast. I really focus on kind of the qualitative community building side because I think that's deeply undervalued. But I'm also going to start talking more on the educational side because I think I underestimate how many people, I overestimate how many people really understand what's going on. So I'm actually going to start a kind of a 101 of Bitcoin Treasury companies threads very shortly. I'm actually writing my first thread today. So yeah, just follow along. Yeah. And hopefully everybody can enjoy this ride.
I'll be checking for that. And I look to have more guests on in the Bitcoin Treasury space like yourself. And hopefully we'll do this again, maybe a few months down the line, see how Metaplanet's going, see how Metaplanet Madness is going and everything, and just check in with you. I think we made a good connection here, and I think we will be very happy in a few years looking back.
You
But
just gotta be careful. With money and fame and attention can attract the wrong people. So I just gotta stay
100.
humble and just keep everything in perspective.
Last thing, Peter, send me some gear, man. Send me some Metaplanet gear. What's going on?
I wish I had Metaplanet gear to get. The few gear I got, I treasure, and I'm not going to, unfortunately, give this away. Unfortunately, they're selling for hundreds if not thousands of dollars, which is another thing. But yeah, you have to get connected to the Metaplanet.
Crazy, right? Well, thanks so much for coming on, Peter. I mean, it's been very informative, kind of a behind the curtains look at Metaplanet madness and what you have going on. And I look forward to having you again on the show.
Appreciate it. Appreciate the time. Thank you.
For sure. Thanks so much.